Analysts and consultants can be a useful aid when it comes to assessing the multitude of different softwares on the market. However, often their views can be somewhat subjective, so today we're going to try and shed a little bit of light on the process and understand how much the supply chain practitioner can trust the results of their surveys. So Janice, I guess this is something you've got a bit of experience in. So how is it that software companies are currently assessed?
At Lokad, we received, I would say, a couple of times a week, every single week, I would say prospects or consultants who wants Lokad to take part into a survey of some kind. You know, it can be either a large company who directly wants to buy a new piece of software, in which case it's going to be an RFP, you know, request for proposal, or consultants, or I would say analysts, market analysts, who just want to assess, you know, Lokad in general. And I would say most of the time, when I say most of the time, I mean like 99% of the time, but it's not always the case, but nearly always. This assessment is going to come under the form of a long questionnaire with checkboxes. And when I say long, I mean several hundreds of checkboxes long. And it usually takes the form of either a spreadsheet where you have like dozens of tabs and you have to check boxes, or it takes the form of an online survey where it's just the same thing on a web page, and then you have again to tick I would say hundreds of checkboxes. And what is very infuriating to me is that it seems to be like the default practice to evaluate enterprise software. You know, you end up and especially for areas like supply chains that are very complex, just because there is a lot of things, you know, to deal with in the real world. So obviously the real world complexity, I would say, shows on the software itself, because the software ends up with tons of features and capabilities one way or another, just to cope with what is out there in the world. And thus you end up with those exceedingly long questionnaires, which actually, I would say, are more a source of confusion than anything else, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's talk about that in a bit more detail then. So where does the source of confusion tend to lie? I mean, these analysts and consultants, they have a fair amount of experience. So why do these questionnaires not work so well?
So you have to think that the vast majority of questions end up, first you end up with an enormous number of questions that are in closed form, you know, like do you support MOQs, or are you compatible with, I would say, a C++ integration? I mean, you end up with tons of questions that are seemingly narrow, you know, it's a yes or no question, but in practice, there is tons of nuance in the answer. And I would say you end up with tons of questions like, do you support, let's say, Excel exports? That would be a classical one. You know, most as enterprise pieces of software, you need to be able to export to Excel. So that's a question that is going to be asked. Do you support Excel exports? But this is actually a very complex question. Do you really want to support Excel export, and how? There's plenty of details. And what is maddening is that those questionnaires with hundreds of checkboxes, they give the illusion of rationality, of precision, while actually most of those binary answers, I mean, we can literally write a chapter of a book on every single of those answers to say, yes, we kind of support Excel export. We max out the capacity in terms of large Excel spreadsheet because it's kind of frequently useful for supply chain, but as far as macros and dangerous options such as loading data from local files on your computer, then we don't. So actually, on purpose, we don't exactly support the full specification of Excel spreadsheet. But you see, that's a lot of nuance. And the same could be said for everything, like MOQs, for example, that is more like a supply chain topic.
Yeah, but I guess kind of the real benefit of taking this questionnaire approach is you can send it out to sort of thousands of different suppliers. I mean, there's so much choice out there. I mean, is there really a better way of doing it?
So first, I would say the questionnaires is just a lazy way. It's not scientific. It's just give you, I would say, an illusion of rationality. Because actually, if we were not discussing about software, just imagine if you were actually reviewing, let's say, restaurants. That's way. I mean, restaurants, yeah, they are kind of all the same. But if you were going to check boxes like, do you serve meat? Yes, no. Do you serve French fries? Yes, no. I would say, do you clean up your dishes at 80 degrees after use? Just random question. Yes, no, etc. And then you would have like hundreds of questions like that. And would that give you any insight on what the hell is going on with this restaurant? Do you want to go there? You could say, I mean, and restaurants are kind of similar, so you could think, well, I can find, question that would make sense. But the reality, it doesn't, And so I believe that those questionnaires, they are the lazy approach. And there is I would say there are many, parties in the market that rely extensively on those because they are easy to scale, and so they become something of a product that you can sell. So if you're like a consultant, you can go to a large company and say, we are going to help you to pick the right piece of software. Here is this 600 checkboxes questionnaire that you can send out to 20 vendors that we just selected for you. And interestingly enough, no matter which type of software you want to pick, I would say maybe 2/3 of the questions are completely independent on the very problem. So it's very maddening because I've seen questionnaires for supply chain software, and the questionnaire is almost the same compared to a marketing software. So for me, those questionnaires are just a very lazy way to probe the market. A better way is to actually try to I would say assess what are the fundamentals of the product that you're trying to buy. What are the fundamentals about the problem that you're trying to solve? And typically, normally, you should be able to summarize that in one page.
Okay, because we sort of know from bitter experience when it comes to sort of explaining what we do here at Lokad, I mean, it takes us hours and hours. We manage to talk about it every week. So what are kind of the characteristics that you'd want to sort of fit into that one page?
I mean, first, there are two sections. First would be one page where you actually describe the problem that you want to solve. And usually, for example, and here there is a lot of, I would say, of things where companies already get it wrong. For example, most companies that were sending us, requests would start by, we want a forecasting software. And then, so basically the one page about the problem would describe their forecasting need. But if you really, got to the bottom of it, you will realize that forecasts are just a mean to an end. So what they really want is typically supply chain performance. So maybe you should, rather than describe, an intermediate problem that might or might not be, part of the final solution. Your problem is not typically for like 99% of the companies. Your problem is not to have like a forecasting solution. The problem is to have like a better supply chain performance. So first, you need to correctly frame the problem, not focusing already on a particular way to solve the problem, but rather on the problem itself. So really, you need on the problem assessment part to really differentiate the problem from what you perceived as being the correct solution. Because the fact that you want a solution or another, I mean, it's the job of the vendors, if such vendors exist in the first place, to actually come up and propose, whatever solution could make sense. Otherwise, there is no point in even probing the market, And then on the software side, when you have software vendor side, when you want to assess a vendor, same thing. You should produce one page that should try to summarize with words, not checkboxes, what the hell is going on with this vendor? What is the vision? What is the core design principle behind the product that you're trying to that the vendor is trying to push forward? And usually it's something that is, although when you look at those questionnaires, it looks like impossibly complex. Hundreds of checkboxes, and that's my problem. That's why I say it's not rational, because if you were to use those questionnaires to describe a product that is as basic as Google or Facebook, you would not even recognize, Facebook. For example, if you ask a question like, are you compatible with C++? Just ask yourself the question, is Facebook compatible with C++? Probably yes. I mean, they have APIs, but what would you? But they are obviously. Facebook is a very complex platform. Some bits are actually in C++. A lot of other bits of Facebook are not in C++. So does that count as a C++ product? Very unclear. So question is, if you could do that, about software vendors in supply chain, can you have in one page something that gives, the core salient features about what the hell is this product about, and how do they approach this problem, and what are, the key driving principle behind what they're doing. And if there are none, if you cannot summarize a product, in one page so that it makes sense, I mean, odds are that this product doesn't make any sense. And this is happening, frequently in the enterprise software space, where you have like products that are, a gigantic pile of inconsistent features, and it's actually exceedingly good at checking boxes. But in the real world, it's exceedingly poor at doing actually anything. Just because there is no vision, no consistency, the vendor has just been piling up for decades, checkboxes and features.
Yeah, so if those sort of analysts and consultant-based questionnaires are maybe somewhat lazy and they don't kind of capture the right details, why is it they've been so popular? Where did they first sort of come from?
That's very interesting. I mean, until I would say, again, year 2000 is like a pivot where the web become completely mainstream, both for regular users and businesses alike. You can argue between 95 and 2000, but let's say by year 2000, the web was there and widespread, super widespread, including businesses. So what is interesting is that at the turn of year 2K, basically you went from a situation where the market, where information was very scarce. I remember my parents, I mean, when they were looking for things like suppliers, it was very difficult. It's not obvious. If prior to year 2000, if you wanted, a supplier in Malaysia, I mean, how do you find that out? It was very, very hard to know what existed. Usually you had to resort to yellow pages, but do you have the yellow pages of Thailand? And even if you do, it's going to be, in a language that you cannot read. So it's not going to be like super, super helpful. So basically you were going to special companies, market analysts, who would basically give you extensive surveys of who is doing what, so that if you look for a specific, supplier, it can be like a software supplier or just a regular, hardware supplier, you would have at least a list of companies that you can contact. With the web, suddenly, and with Google that we just mentioned, suddenly it becomes exceedingly simple. Information becomes exceedingly simple to get. You're looking for somebody who can do, let's say, high voltage transistors, something random I'm just making up. Okay, I want a high voltage transistor, then you can just type on Google high voltage transistor manufacturer, and within 1 hour you will have a list of 20 companies that can do that. Fine. So you could have thought, and that was actually my guess at the time, you could have thought that thanks to Google and other search engine, well, the market for, I would say, analyst companies would have disappeared, just because companies would just have used search engines instead. But this is absolutely not what happened. And on the contrary, those companies, at least some of them, started to be even bigger than ever. But what was interesting, you had like analyst companies, so companies that survey many vendors. It can be vendors of software products or hardware products. I'm more focusing here on software products, but obviously you have like all sorts of vendors. And interestingly, what happened is that those analyst companies, what was their business model? I mean, prior to year 2000, they were selling reports to companies. So again, generation of my parents, they would seek a supplier for something in Thailand or maybe a software vendor in the US. They would go to those companies and they would buy the report, the quarterly report or yearly report, and they would find the list of the companies you should produce from that. But then afterward, what was interesting is that those analyst companies, they started to realize with the web that basically their value proposition was gone. I mean, obviously, it was so easy to get access to information. But what they started they completely pivoted, and they started to go to tech vendors mostly, especially on the software side, tech vendors, and tell to vendors, you know what, we are going to go for pay-to-play. So what is pay-to-play? Pay-to-play is that we are an analyst. There is like an overabundance of bazillion, vendor out there. But you know what? If you want to be featured prominently in our report, it's going to be, we are not going to do that for free. You're going to pay. And that was a complete reverse of the business model. I mean, prior to year 2K, the analyst companies would basically never charge the vendors because that would have been a complete conflict of interest. You're an analyst, you want to be completely neutral. So obviously you would say, I'm never going to take any cent from the vendors. I'm going to sell my reports to client companies who want to assess, suppliers, tech vendors, and whatnot. And obviously, I'm going to remain completely neutral with respect of tech vendors because otherwise I have biases. And then after year 2K, year 2000, basically they started to completely pivot and say, well, it has become very, very hard to sell those reports. And literally, I mean, nowadays, I don't see, Lokad, we have over 100 client companies. I have never seen, any CEO for the last decade or CTO that truly look at those reports. What they do, but nonetheless, those analyst companies, they are bigger than ever, but they charge software vendors instead.
So what's the idea then? That the more you pay, the better you look in this report and the more you're showcased?
I mean, officially, no. Officially, officially, when you talk with those analyst companies, and again, just to give you the magnitude of this effect, is that I am probed as the CEO of Lokad, I think twice a week, there is a salesperson from one of those analyst vendors that just, invite me on LinkedIn and say, can we talk? And I've never been, even, I would say, even headhunters and hiring agencies, are not as pressing as those folks, at least on LinkedIn. And literally, so when I discuss with them, I've done that, dozens of times, they would say, oh no, we never collect any money from tech vendors. Never. Yeah, never. That would obviously be a complete breach of trust, a complete breach of ethics. That would be, yes, that would be borderline fraud. Obviously, we don't do that. No, we don't. But you know what? Yeah, we don't do that. But you know what? We can help you. Yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Yeah, and we have many programs to kind of coach you to better reach the market. And all of that is going to be very costly, and we are going to charge you. And it just so happened that on our quadrants, most of those analyst companies have quadrants of some sorts. Well, it just happened that on the quadrants, the people that are classified as visionaries are just people that have acquired from us a lot of training session and coaching things, and that are taking parts of our events, very expensive events. And so it's very interesting because you could see that I'm pretty sure that in those companies, they kind of, those analyst companies, they manage to convince themselves that they are still the good guy, that they are still, I would say, providing like a neutral point of view to the market or whatever. But it's literally bullshitting yourself. It's what I've seen is that over those 2 decades, after year 2000, is that as those analyst companies started to pivot toward a new business model where instead of charging clients for reports that you sell, they started to charge tech vendors and vendors in general to promote them. They have gone from analyst companies to actually marketing agencies. That's what they are nowadays. And it's very funny because by doing this pivot, they are much bigger than ever. And they have literally grown, 5x over 2 decades by doing this pivot, because they realized that actually vendors who are, especially in the software side, that are very profitable companies for many of them, have actually a lot more money to spend than regular companies would ever had money to spend on the original reports. And so that's very interesting, because we ended up with a situation, and again, back to the questionnaires, again, if you're a marketing agencies, suddenly the fact that you assess product in any rational way becomes kind of a secondary concern anyway. Why? Because you're not in the business model of being like a super good assessment of the market. You're in the market of being a super good marketing agency, which is a completely different business model. And by the way, it's completely fine. By me, it's completely fine to be a marketing agency. What is completely not fine, not fine, I would say, is to pretend that you're a neutral, I would say, market analyst, while actually the bulk of your revenues come from vendors, and you end up with a completely biased perspective just due to the fact that your clients are now the tech vendors. So you're serving the interest of the tech vendors, not of the clients who try to acquire anything.
Okay, if we start sort of looking ahead to maybe the future then, do you think these analyst companies are sort of too established and they're here to stay? Or do you think the market will eventually realize that there's this pay-to-play kind of operations going on, and the value they're adding is kind of minimal because it's only really from a money perspective?
The interesting thing is that the market in general is very good at developing antibodies. Like when you have something like a cancer, and you just have like an immune response to it. So it's very funny, because if you look at client companies, so companies that would, like the companies where my parents worked, 30 years ago, companies are not buying those reports anymore. Very rarely, and they're not. I'm pretty sure. Again, a generation ago, companies were spending, a lot of money to buy reports. When I say a lot of money in equivalent, dollars, they would buy, a report at $50,000. I don't see that happening at all. Maybe for super large companies because the board wants something or whatever. Maybe in finance. There are still, expensive reports being sold, but they were really commonplace 3 decades ago. Now I suspect, from what I can observe, they are very, very rare. And if you can get away with $2,000 report, it's already kind of very expensive. So those things are kind of have already vanished. So in terms of the evolution, it's already been done on the client side. What is very maddening is that it has not yet happened on the vendor side. And I see a lot of competitors of Lokad who are still spending truckload of money for those analyst companies. Good for them. They have quadrants where they are classified, as visionaries for having super dumb stuff like safety stock, service level, and ABC analysis. You would say I'm very partial, and but ABC analysis is a future. Yeah, future. Yes. Yeah, maybe you can be a visionary having safety stocks which are completely unsafe. Maybe. I don't think so. But back on track, it's very funny, because what I see right now is that the market has pretty much catch up with the new situation as far, real companies who really want information. I also see that very good consultants, let's say, tier one management consultant agencies, let's say, if we have to name 3, that would be, BCG, McKinsey, Roland Berger. Those sort of folks they kind of distanciate themselves from vendors. They are very careful not to be promoting, specific vendors like a marketing agency. So they have already done, I would say, the right move, which is to have like a clear separation between their business and what they recommend to their clients, because their business is still, to deliver value to the clients, not to basically charge vendors and take a cut. And tech vendors, they will ultimately realize that it's a waste of money. But that's also very funny. Software businesses have been highly profitable. There are tons of very, very profitable software companies out there. So in a way, it's just that there is not the same degree of urgency to just cut the budgets, even if it doesn't serve, I would say, it doesn't help much. When you're very profitable, you can cut spendings, but it's not necessarily like your number one priority.
Okay, brilliant. We'll have to wrap it up there, but cheers for your time. So that's everything for this week. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Bye for now.